And you're watching RootsTV Nigeria. We are live at the Situation Room of Yaga Africa watching the vote. And with me here is the board chair, Hussein Abdul. How many states are you observing the governorship elections at?
We are voting in 29 states. Those are the states where governorship election is currently holding.
Okay. Now, being that poll opened, some hours back, could you give us an overview, like a summary of what you've observed thus far?
What we observe is that, look, less than 50% of the polling unit across these 29 states opened at the stipulated time of opening. So generally we can say we've experienced the same trend that we saw with the presidential election in terms of late opening, despite all the recommendations and the call that we have made to INEC and over 2 weeks, or some almost 2 weeks to prepare for these elections, which for us is not too good enough.
Okay, now there's been, different talks of low voter turnout. We saw that in Kogi State, where the governor himself, made that. What do you think is the cause of this decline and some sort of voter apathy?
I think it's a general trend in the country, and every succeeding election we've experienced that once you have the presidential elections, you have voters turnout. For me, I think it's the failure of politicians to hold on their electorate and get to mobilize them to vote. We over-celebrate the presidential election and put all the energy on the presidential election without corresponding reserves for further push. So once you finish the presidential election for the electorate, it's like we've done it. And then the energy drops to zero. So what politicians need to do at all time is to ensure that they keep up the momentum. Politicians have not learned how to keep the momentum for elections after presidential election. The second is also that, look, those who win presidential elections get into that euphoria of success, and therefore they've achieved it and they don't want to move. Those who lost the elections sometimes get disappointed and are not able to gather themselves together. That's the capacity, what we call political resilience. They don't have that resilience to say, oh, I've lost this one, but I must not lose the next one, and put themselves together to go out there and mobilize people to vote. So, and the third dimensions to these is that because we have experienced so much years of military rule in this country, with so much higher level of centralization at the national level, the presidency becomes very important. Even after transition to democracy, the presidency is still presented as the most important political institution. People don't mind the fact that the state level controls over about 51% of our national resources. The center only controls 49%. People forget about that, and they put emphasis on federal government.
Now, one of the reasons, some might say, is the violence that was noticed, in the last elections that, probably caused voter apathy. Now, talking about the flashpoint, the states where, they're susceptible to all of this violence, what have your observers, observed so far?
Violence wasn't pervasive. It wasn't as pervasive as also people were presenting. There were a few states where we experienced violence, and it was very clear. We had it in Rivers, and Rivers has historically been violent when it comes to elections. We had it in Bayelsa, and we also know we had it in Lagos, and we also know the context in which this actually happened. Violence has a huge tendency to create voter apathy. There's a strong diametrical relationship between violence and voter apathy. So where people experience violence, the tendency for them not to come out for the next election is very high. And we are seeing that in some of the states that I actually mentioned.
And so I've been talking to Hussein Abdul, the board chair of Yaga Africa, watching the vote. Keep the dial locked on RootsTV Nigeria to bring you these updates and more.